these sword ferns and whatnot. And look at this tree growing right here. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Look at this flush of what are known as turkey tail mushrooms, Trametes versicolor.
Welcome to Mushroom Wonderland.
Hey, what's going on? This is Aaron Hilliard from Mushroom Wonderland, and I'm out here in the forests of the Pacific Northwest, and what I do on this channel is I forage for mushrooms. And this is a time of year where in the Northwest we're typically not having a lot of mushrooms growing out here, but there definitely are still some species of mushrooms that are growing out here in the forest, especially in the coniferous forests of the Northwest, that you can find and forage and eat and get on your dinner table, or if you're in a survival situation, or if you're into bushcraft. These are some mushrooms that you'll be able to find out here in the woods, in the PNW, and we hope that you take advantage of this channel by hitting subscribe, give a thumbs up if you get value out of these videos, and leave a positive comment. So I hate to keep you guys waiting on these interesting mushrooms that you might be able to forage out here in the forest, so let's get talking about them. I'm not guaranteeing that you're gonna find them, although these are mushrooms that can be found this time of year. So come along with me, Aaron Hilliard, Mushroom Wonderland, and let's see what mushrooms we could find out here growing right here in the forest of the great PNW. Come on everybody, let's go. So one of the first things to notice about a forest like this in January is that you're not going to find nearly as many mushrooms as you were finding earlier in autumn. A lot of these mushrooms have already done their thing. They've already fruited and they have sent their spores out, and it has recently snowed here within the last couple of weeks, and so a lot of this mycelium has kind of just gone dormant, and so it's going to be growing underground. And in the spring, when it starts to warm up and a lot of rain starts falling, the mycelium is really going to start growing. And so the mushrooms that we get in the fall are really dependent on the moisture and the amount of mycelial growth that happens in the spring. So we're hoping that we get a nice wet spring and it warms up pretty decently, and this is going to help that mycelium come back to life and really start to populate underneath the ground, so that when it comes time for it to fruit, it can sprout mushrooms out to repeat this life cycle. I'm just walking along down the trail, and then I spot something over here in the woods. So I'm always scanning, always scanning with my eyes to see anything that looks a little bit different out here in the woods, because it can look kind of dull and drab. But I see a tree right over here, some cool looking mushrooms growing on it. So let's go take a look over here. I'm gonna flip the camera for you. So around here, a bunch of maple trees growing right here, and we're gonna walk some of these sword ferns and whatnot. And look at this tree growing right here. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Look at this flush of what are known as turkey tail mushrooms, Trametes versicolor. So this is an awesome winter mushroom, and very medicinal. And these have been used for centuries by the Chinese for treatment and all kinds of things. Antioxidation, anti-inflammatory, even been known to be anti-cancerous. So if you look underneath the cap, and it's got all these little tiny white holes, these are called pores. Okay, this is where the spores drop out of. Let me pull another one off of this tree. This one's a little fresher. We'll take a look. See all those little tiny holes? Those are pores. And so spores drop out of those, and false turkey tail don't have those pores. It's just really smooth under here on a false turkey tail or a Asterium genus. But these ones are the Trametes versicolor. So look at these concentric color zones, or these rings growing outward. And these are not like trees, so this isn't like annual growth. I would bet these have all grown relatively soon. These have been not growing too long. This is a really fresh and beautiful flush of them. So the mycelium is growing inside of this log, and all of these have sprouted out. So they're just spreading millions of spores all over the forest. And right now is a good time to find turkey tail. So a really good mushroom to put in a tea or a tincture. And you can use that. Listen to Paul Stamets' TED Talk about his mom actually being cured of cancer using the turkey tail, or Trametes versicolor. So a little too chewy to really want to eat, but a great one to put in tea to boost your immune system and maybe give you longer life even. So cool. These would be a good one to pick and take home and dry out and make into powder. Although it can be a little bit tricky if you put them into a food processor. They often make just what kind of looks like cotton, but you can really see why it's called a turkey tail, right? Looks just like the tail of a little cartoon Thanksgiving turkey you might have drawn when you were a kid. Although you probably spread your hand out on a piece of paper and traced it. But you know what I'm saying. They look like a turkey tail. So anyways, this one very popular and widely used medicinal mushroom that you can find growing saprobically on trees like this. So it's eating all the goodies inside of this bark, and this is a great flush of them. So these would be great to pick and take home, but I've got quite a bit of them already at home, so I think I'm going to leave this one in the woods just in case anybody else wants to find them and use them and take advantage of what nature has to offer out here in the wild. So Trametes versicolor, the turkey tail mushroom growing here in January in the PNW. Beautiful mushroom, and one that really kind of stands out and it can catch your eye from a ways away. So super cool. All right, let's keep moving. Dang, that was a huge cedar tree. It's a shame it cut down like that. You wonder how long could that guy have lived if it weren't cut. Look how big that is. So cedar trees actually have a natural resistance to fungi, so you don't find ectomycorrhizal mushrooms growing with cedar, and you don't find even many saprotrophic mushrooms growing around cedar trees, or maple trees for that matter. These trees just have a way of resisting the fungus, which is good for building materials here in the PNW when your cedar is resistant to fungi. But nonetheless, if you find yourself in a big cedar grove or a maple grove, usually not the best mushroom picking. So check out this thing growing right here on this maple tree. It's a really big old mature maple tree, and we've got this really soft kind of little conch mushroom growing here on the side of this tree. Very unique. I don't run into these very often. There's a little bit more of a flush right up here, if we can see it growing right there. But a super cool mushroom, kind of rare here in the Northwest. So this is actually called Chrondostereum purpureum, and so it's not actually related to sterium. This is a sign of a serious disease on this tree. This is known as silverleaf is the common name for this thing. But the Chrondostereum purpureum is a fungal disease. They actually have found a way to make a mycoherbicide out of this to kill weed trees, and they put it in a paste and they smear it on trees that they want to kill with a very ravaging parasitic fungus. It's actually not related to sterium, the false turkey tail, but this is just the fruit of what is going on inside of this tree. Is just it's completely eating the inside of this tree. This is a large old maple tree. You can see the darkness around growing on the bark. That is actually the infection is just taking over this particular branch on this tree. And who knows how far it's actually gone. It could be killing this whole huge cluster of maple trees here. But this is known as to be a huge problem on cherry trees and plum trees, apple trees, pear trees. You do not want this stuff getting in your orchard if you're a fruit farmer. So this Chrondostereum or silver leaf, it gets its common name because it changes the leaves growing on the ends of these branches pretty silver. But it's got this really pretty bouquet of purple looking stuff. And unfortunately, this big maple cluster right here is infected with it. A couple things to consider when you're going out mushroom foraging in January is what you're going to wear. You want to make sure that you're warm and dry. You don't want your feet getting wet. So, be prepared if you're going to come out into the woods looking for wild mushrooms that you might get off the beaten path a little bit. And you want to keep your feet warm. And I definitely want to keep my body warm because it's chilly out here. Sometimes you get a ways out into the woods and before you know it, you're like, I'm cold and wet. And I'm a long ways from the car. Some mushrooms can survive with even cold temperatures and even freezing temperatures. We have oyster mushrooms around here that can grow even in the winter time, although a more hardy variety of Pleurotus seem to grow out east, like out in the Midwest and on the East Coast, that can really survive colder temperatures. The Pleurotus ostreatus, or oyster mushroom that we have here in the PNW, it rarely does flush here in the middle of January, but you can still find it. It's one of those mushrooms that you can find in the wintertime around here. That is a good edible, and that one is easy to identify, and there really is no dangerous lookalikes. So the oyster mushroom is a great winter mushroom. Really, really good one for edible culinary purposes, so keep an eye out. Oyster mushrooms around here mainly associate with alder trees, and so this is a really good winter edible mushroom that you can go out and forage, mainly growing on dead snags or dead logs, even trees that have had their top busted off. You can often find big flushes of oyster mushrooms growing in the wintertime. Really good mushroom to put into soups and stews and to slice up and just use in place of any mushroom in any recipe. The oyster mushroom, or Pleurotus, is often cultivated, and that mushroom you can find in more gourmet grocers here in the United States, but is one of those mushrooms that you can head out into the woods almost anywhere you are in a temperate, rainy region of the United States and get wild, gourmet, edible mushrooms for free, and with the added bonus of getting to be out in the forest and foraging for them. So the oyster mushroom is a really good winter mushroom. That's a good one to look out for, Pleurotus ostreatus. Another really good wild edible mushroom you can find growing sometimes here in the Pacific Northwest and all over the world is known affectionately and commonly as the honey mushroom, or Armillaria species. So this genus of mushrooms, Armillaria, can kill trees. It's known to be parasitic, and it grows at the base of trees, and often you can find it growing on dead logs and rotting stumps here in the forest of the PNW. But this one is pretty easy to identify because it grows in these large clusters. The one that grows here in the Pacific Northwest probably still needs to be sequenced to give it a new name. Some people just call it the Armillaria malea, the same as the one that grows in Europe and on the East Coast. A good way to describe this mushroom is that the cap looks like it has a 5 o'clock shadow, so it looks like it hasn't shaved in a little while. This one has been known to upset some people's stomachs, so always eat just a little bit to start out with and see if it's going to agree with your system or not. Personally, I can eat them and I think they're delicious. My wife, not a big fan of them. Neither of us have had stomach problems from them, but from what I understand, some people do. So this is not a mushroom that you want to be sharing at a dinner party and serving to a lot of people who have never tried them before, because you don't want a reputation of somebody who's feeding wild mushrooms to people that are making them sick. That's a big no-no there. So, but one to look out for on the base of rotting stumps or on the base of or even live trees would be the honey mushroom or Armillaria. So check that one out. You can Google that or look in a field guide to get better characteristics for identification of the honey mushroom. But growing in these big clusters, it's got this big ring on the stipe. The caps can be quite hygrophorous, which means that they start to fade and change color as they dry out. And they can be quite handsome mushrooms, especially when they have that 5 o'clock shadow on them. So check those ones out. Good winter mushroom, the honey mushroom. So I have mentioned before that you need to make sure to cook your mushrooms thoroughly. So this goes for any mushroom, even the grocery store agaricus button mushroom. You want to make sure that you cook those well. Those actually contain a carcinogen known as Agaritine, which can cause cancer. So when you cook it, it easily breaks down that carcinogen and makes it just fine and safe to eat, but not safe to be eating those raw or any mushrooms really. Make sure that you get a flame underneath them and cook them pretty well. 10 minutes of simmering is a pretty good bet for any mushroom, and then it becomes nutritionally available for your system. The cell walls of the mushroom are protected by lignin, which our human system can't break down naturally, but it's easily broken down with heat. So make sure that you cook your mushrooms pretty well so that not only do you not get indigestion because you can't digest it, but also that you can derive the nutritional benefits of mushrooms, which there are plenty. And for a long time, people thought that mushrooms just have no nutritional benefits, but it's turned out it's a huge lie. You can research that. I don't know a ton of those nutritional facts off the top of my head, but I do know some mushrooms contain a ton of vitamins as well as protein and some fats. So these are things that you could survive off in a survival situation in the forest. Do not discount fungus as being a good food source for you if you're out there in the woods and you're lost. This one, a beautiful little flush of mushrooms growing all over this branch. Growing right here on this maple tree, which is the second mushroom that we've seen growing on maple trees today, which is kind of rare. But these are fairy parachutes, and I don't know if you can see that or see why they might be called a fairy parachute, but this is a Mirasmiellus candidus, or the fairy parachute. So this is a really delicate little mushroom in the family Mirasmiaceae, which is in the same family as the common fairy ring mushroom. So there's the fairy ring mushroom and then the fairy parachute. And so it's kind of a common one here in the winter. Mirasmiellus candidus, the fairy parachute. Pretty little mushrooms. So even when it's winter time, it's a wonderful time to be out here in the forests of the PNW. I just love foraging in the woods, looking for what mushrooms I can find. So I hope you enjoyed that. Hit that subscribe button, hit like, and I appreciate you watching. Much love to you all. See you on the next episode.